Once upon a golden time, Lance Armstrong was considered the best of the best in the world of cycling. But then the 51-year-old was dethroned when they banned him from participating in 2012. His story is something that none of us can forget, and now a whole decade later, it's worth mentioning again. We'll be looking at all the reasons we think Armstrong may or may not return to cycling, so let's get started. To begin with, are we ready to see Lance Armstrong make a comeback? We know how much of an incredible reach it is, hoping that Lance Armstrong would make a comeback now. Well, it's really no secret all that went down almost 10 years ago. And in light of that, just how improbable it is that the 51-year-old could ever return to the sport he once dominated not so long ago. Still, it seems like something that won't ever happen, but things do change and we never know what might happen. With that in mind, let's go over all that happened and all that's changed in the last 10 years, ever since Armstrong was banned, and then we'll see if cycling's ready to see Armstrong return to the starting line. Moving on, a look at the former cyclist's legacy in the sport. The cycling legend has plenty of accolades to his name, but nothing quite beats the memory of his 7 back-to-back wins at the Tour de France from 1999 to 2005. What made these victories even more special was the fact that he had just joined back after his battle with testicular cancer. You can imagine just how in awe everyone was of Armstrong's strength and resilience. Not only had he managed to fight an incredibly malignant disease, but he'd also given his all to cycling and won so impressively. Following up, the allegations that emerged against the 51-year-old. But it looks like it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for Armstrong. Right after he returned to the 1990 Tour de France competition, the allegations started taking root. They began as whispers because some people found it very difficult to believe that someone who had just fought a debilitating condition like cancer could up and win a competition this quickly. It just seemed physically impossible. After the 1999 win, Armstrong tested positive for steroid use, but he ended up showing his medical prescriptions as evidence about how he wasn't using them to enhance his performance. Fast forward 7 years later, and it's 2005. The 51-year-old had his 7th win at the Tour de France. After that, he decided to enter retirement so he can spend more time with his family. Around this time, some of his blood samples from 1999 are tested again, and they come back positive for doping. Armstrong, on the other hand, denies the allegations. Up next, the man's return to the world of competitive cycling in 2009. 4 years later, we see Armstrong make a comeback after his retirement, and this time he's doing it to raise awareness about the global cancer burden. Immediately after he's back, he ends up winning the Tour de France in 3rd place. Not bad at all considering how he was on a break for a total of 4 years. Then it's 2010, and it's the year when things started going really bad for this champion cyclist. He participates in a bunch of cycling events, but it's nothing as impressive as his 7 consecutive Tour de France wins. At the same time, the crackdown on Armstrong has begun. As it turns out, Floyd Landis, one of Armstrong's teammates, confessed to using drugs to better his athletic performance. What's more, he sent emails to both U.S. and European cycling officials that he had been doing it since 2002 and that Armstrong was involved with him. Well, oops. With all the trouble on the horizon, Armstrong ended up going back into retirement, but it looks like he wasn't having an easy way out this time. Fast forward to 2012, and the United States Doping Agency, USADA, goes ahead and files charges against Armstrong for using and possessing banned substances. In fact, the agency even suggested putting a lifetime ban on the 51-year-old. Let's look at how Armstrong was banned from the sport after an investigation into the allegations. In light of all the allegations, and in the case filed against the former cycling champion, a detailed and thorough investigation is carried out. It's found out that Armstrong happened to be the ringleader of a pretty sophisticated and organized doping program. At that time, Armstrong didn't challenge the verdict and said something about how he wanted to keep his family protected from all the unnecessary drama. The decision's made, and it's in no way Armstrong's favor. They strip him of his once victorious 7 consecutive Tour de France wins, and he's no longer allowed to cycle or take part in any other sport that abides by the World Anti-Doping Code. And then in 2013, Armstrong came forward and admitted that he indeed did play a role in this network of doping. Not to mention the seismic impact of Armstrong's rise to fame and eventual fall from grace. What Armstrong did was something to be remembered forever. When he won the fight against cancer and returned to bag those 7 historic wins, it earned him quite a reputation, and you can imagine how easily he became a favorite for the fans. Then you won't have a hard time imagining the reaction most fans had to Armstrong's ban. When we tell you it was pretty strong, you best take our word for it. So many of his fans were in literal tears when the truth about him saw the light of day. In fact, it got so bad that the head of the anti-doping agency behind the entire investigation started to receive death threats. Denial really is the first step towards grief, and the absolute shocking thing is that he might have gotten away with it all. The one mistake he made was returning in 2009. After his return, as we mentioned, he never really achieved the same heights that he had with those 7 wins. That definitely cast suspicion over his performance. If he was so good as to win 7 times after fighting cancer, why couldn't he do the same? What's more, the former cyclist's appearance on the podcast The Move seems to be quite a hit. But things haven't been all too bleak for this former cyclist. We've seen him make a couple of appearances in the famous podcast The Move, where the 51-year-old offers his cycling insights and analyses to a growing community community of cycling fans. Interestingly, the podcast's quite a hit, with it being among the top 50 podcasts at the moment, and during the tour, it was mentioned among the top 5 podcasts for sports. Now, could Armstrong return to cycling? Keeping all that we mentioned in mind, Armstrong's appearance on the move has made fans wonder if he could still make a return to the world of cycling. For us, it sounds like wishful thinking, but with how he's gaining popularity again, it's entirely possible various brands and teams could start endorsing him once again. We wouldn't be too surprised if that happens, taking into account how the media industry works. If it does end up being true, it would be quite a thing. But for now, the lifetime ban continues. Let's take a look at some of Armstrong's most unforgettable moments from his Tour de France wins. We mentioned those 7 wins quite a lot, so let's go over some top memorable moments from that time in Lance's life. First off, the 51-year-old's unplanned cyclocross in 2003. Who could ever forget the impromptu cyclocross from the Tour de France 2003? It was a very iconic move, and it's worth mentioning a million times. In this event, Armstrong was trying to chase the very dangerous Alexander Vinkurov with fellow competitor Josip Baloki, but they came at a corner too fast, and the moment Baloki hit the brakes, he ended up hitting the pavement. Armstrong's way was blocked, but his quick judgment sprang into action, and he went off the pavement. The 51-year-old found a small path in the field, and he improvised his way back into the race. You see why it's hard to forget a thing like this. Next up, we have the memorable moment from his first tour since his cancer recovery. This one deserves a spot on our list because it evokes all kinds of happy sentiments. In his first tour since his recovery from cancer, Armstrong had been doing pretty well. He had made it through the first 7 flat stages and was now in stage 9 already. Despite that, a lot of people were skeptical that he could make it because, according to them, the mountains would give Armstrong some trouble since he was pretty average at climbing. Oh, but did he prove them wrong? He conquered the climbing stage and left everyone just as surprised. Last but not least, the intense stare down at the slopes of L'Alpe d'Huez. Oh boy, this one's from 2001, and if you should know one thing, the slopes of L'Alpe d'Huez are every cyclist's worst nightmare. Once Armstrong had reached the slopes, he swiftly moved toward the front to join the rest of the contestants, and there he stood before he attacked and cycled fast ahead of the group. During this entire time, he gave them the look. It's turned into a pretty famous thing in cycling lore, but according to Armstrong, it wasn't intentional at all. Intentional or not, it was pretty legendary, we've got to admit. That's a wrap for this video. Do you think it's possible that they'll ever let Lance cycle again? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.